This is Rich Morrison, and welcome to my latest edition of the Thinking Cap, where today we're going to talk about the acreage report that's coming up this Monday. USDA will release its 2025 June planted acreage numbers Monday at 11 a.m. Central Time. The trade will likely have a move after that report. It's pretty common that we see maybe a little bit of a surprise. So the trade doesn't expect a surprise going in. That's what makes it a surprise. And so I wanted to take a few minutes to look at what the trade is expecting to see, what the potential impact might be given some of the different types of numbers that we could see out of this report on Monday. These are the estimates going into the report as reported by Bloomberg. And surprisingly, if you look over on the right-hand column, the guesses, the average guesses for corn, soybeans, throw in wheat, although it's mixed between spring durum and all, cotton, sorghum, nothing expected out of the ordinary. The average estimate is just about right with what we had back in the March planting intentions reports. However, if you look at the difference between the high and the low estimate in corn, 3 million acres, soybeans, 3 million acres, wheat, over 1.5 million, cotton, 1.3 million. There's a big range of estimates here as we go into this report. And that's what could make this thing kind of exciting on Monday, depending on which way we go. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes, go through our stocks matrices, kind of show you what the impact would be of a higher or lower number in some of these crops. So let's start out looking at corn. You've seen this matrix before. I show it at all of our update meetings throughout the growing season. We'll talk about it again after this report comes out in the June after or the July aftermath. But here's what the stocks matrix looks like. And the numbers within the matrix are ending stocks in 2026. We know we're going to start this year, the yellow number, 1.365 billion bushels is what the government's currently projecting as of September 1. They're forecasting next year's demand near record 15.46 billion bushels. So I would stress that already, the one difference between this year and last year, going into last year, we were not forecasting record demand for corn, but it grew over the year and that number has continued to climb. This year, USDA has already plugged that number in. So good or bad, we're already talking near record demand next year. It probably won't grow a lot more. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. So from a bullish surprise, we've kind of already thrown that at the market. But then on the left-hand side, we've got all of the yield estimates on the right, or excuse me, acreage estimates on the top. We've got yield estimates. I've got a range of 174 to 184 right now. The government's currently at 181. I threw in some of the recent year numbers. By the way, 181 would be a record, so keep that in mind. Crop conditions maybe don't quite equate to that number just yet, but we'll see how that changes throughout the growing season. Then within the matrix, the green numbers are all above this year's carryout, 1.365. The red numbers are all below it. So you can see there's a lot more green than red on the screen. Pretty good odds that we're going to grow stocks this year based on additional acres that we had from last year. The dark green would represent above 1.8 billion, which means we're pretty comfortable up at that level, pretty negative on price. Here within the lighter green, pretty much within the range we've been the last year or two, which is kind of where the government's currently projecting. You get down below 1.4 billion and even below, now you start to get kind of tight, probably means higher prices than where we're at today. So the March intentions number was 95.3 million. The average trade estimate, 95.4. The highest guess was 96.8, the lowest at 93.8. So if you go down to this, or start with the highest number, if we get up around 96 plus million acres, pretty darn good odds that we're going to grow stocks this year. Even if the yield ticks back a bushel or two, we're going to have a pretty good sized growth in stocks. And right now, I think the market is kind of trading that a higher acreage number maybe, or at least a comfortable stock situation, even at the current number at 95.3. I think the market is comfortable with a 180 plus yield right now and seems to be plugging that in. I think traders are comfortable being on the short side. What happens if What happens if we drop planted acres, or down the road we end up with some prevented plant acres, whatever the case is, but we end up with fewer harvested acres? Say we go down to the low end here at 86 million. At 86 million, you can still grow stocks this year, although not by a large amount. You can see at a 181 yield, you're still only looking at 1.5 billion carryout, which is not a big increase. And if you slip in yield at all, then you're, probably bullish. So this kind of lays out to me the possibilities. And once we get the report, then we'll take the acreage part of the equation kind of off for a while. And then we'll just predominantly be looking at yields for the rest of the growing season. So, but you can kind of see pretty good odds that we're going to grow stocks this year, even with this near record demand forecast. And that's why the corn market is doing what it's doing right now. Flipping over to soybeans. Just the opposite kind of with beans, because we're going to reduce acres this year. The government told us we planted 83, or we were intending to plant 83.5 million. We're going to start the year at 350 million carryout. We're going to use a big number, maybe the second or third highest demand number next year at 4.415 billion bushels. With a government yield at 452.5, we're still not going to see stocks keep up with where we were a year ago. And so this crush demand, especially following the release of the new renewable fuel standard recently for 26 and 27, that was pretty positive to beans, because now we're looking at good strong demand. We don't have the acres. We're already factoring in a big yield number. So that's why beans have held up very well relative to what corn has done over the last month or so. So looking at the extremes, what if we plant 85 million acres of beans? What if we did see a switch from corn to beans prior to June? Then at 52.5, you can get stocks up over 350 million, but not a lot. So the odds of growing stocks this year in beans are pretty darn slim, even if we do see a big bump in acres. However, if you see a drop in intended acres, what if the government comes out and said that we planted more corn? The Dakotas and the upper Midwest, weather was good in the spring, and other places made up for maybe some of the trouble in the Ohio Valley. We planted more corn, we planted less beans. What if they say we only planted 82 million acres of beans? Now we're scrambling. We've got to have a big yield just to keep a minimum of 200 million bushels in ending stocks next year. So I don't see the bean situation being as negative as potentially what we're seeing in corn. Now, this isn't a surprise. The market is already kind of trading all of this, and I think this is what's kept the bean market up at some decent numbers relative to corn. The other thing with beans, we've already factored in this huge Brazilian crop. China started to come to the table to buy more beans, so the beans have a better opportunity to hold, I think, here maybe than corn does. And then finally in cotton, when you look at the cotton numbers, the government says we're going to start. They lowered the beginning stock number down to 4.4 million bales. Demand is, I think, probably the big question mark right now. The government's forecasting 14.2 million bale demand next year. That's over 1.5 million more than this year. I'm not sure what they're thinking at this point. They must be thinking we're going to get a trade deal or something done. Who knows? But I'm a little bit leery of just plugging in that 14.2. That all said, if you look at 9.7 million intended acres, depending on what you're using for yield, you're looking at, carry out over 3 million bales. If you get up above that, 10.2, the high end, which I'm not convinced that that's going to happen, but maybe we planted more acres in Texas. Maybe that's what this person's thinking. Now you've got a chance to get over 4 million bales, maybe get back up close to last year. But if we lost acres, say down into Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, because of prevented plant, Arkansas, now you've potentially taken ending stocks down even maybe below 2 million bales. So I think this cotton thing could be pretty extreme. I do think the one number I don't trust on this whole screen right now is this demand forecast for next year. I'd probably be 1 million bales less than that, which gives you more room to play here within the matrix. So we'll talk about all of these in the July aftermath, about a week and a half after this June 30th acreage report comes out. The market will then plug those acreage numbers into the balance sheets for that report. So what do we got coming up besides the reports here on Monday? We got an Independence Day holiday next Friday, so we'll have a shortened week. On the 11th, a week later, we'll have the WASDA report from USDA that will plug in these planted acreage numbers. Then on the following Monday, the 14th, I'll be hosting the aftermath, and we'll discuss all of those numbers within the equations. Then we'll look at predominantly yield changes and what could affect carryout down the road. So with that, thank you for listening to this edition of the Thinking Cap. Hope you have a great day. Hope you stay cool, and we'll talk to you again very soon.